battle against cruelty. Sarah and I met during our high school years, a time when friendships are built on shared dreams, laughter, and whispered secrets. From the very beginning, there was something different about her, an energy, a determination that set her apart. While most of us were still figuring out what we wanted to do with our lives, Sarah had already made up her mind. She was going to join the military, not just as an idea or a passing ambition, but as a certainty, a mission she had set for herself. And she wasn't just planning it alone. She had already decided that I would be right there beside her. At first, I thought it was just talk. After all, we were teenagers, making promises about the future without fully understanding what they meant. But Sarah was serious. She would drag me to early morning runs, talking about discipline, about pushing our limits. She devoured books on strategy, warfare, and leadership, absorbing knowledge with an intensity that made even our teachers take notice. It was as if she had been born for this life, her mind always several steps ahead of the rest of us. Sarah was a natural leader. People gravitated toward her, drawn to the quiet confidence in her eyes, the way she made even the most impossible dreams seem attainable. She wasn't loud or boastful, but she had a way of inspiring others, making them believe in themselves just as much as she believed in them. And I was happy just to be part of her world, to follow her lead. But life isn't as simple as youthful dreams. As the years passed, the weight of reality pressed down on her. The same determination that had made her unstoppable in high school now became a burden. She carried expectations, not just her own, but those of her family, her mentors, and everyone who had ever looked up to her. The pressure was immense, and slowly, cracks began to form. I watched as she struggled, as the fire in her eyes dimmed little by little. She still fought, of course she did. That was who Sarah was. But the battles became harder, the victories fewer. And then one day, the girl who had once seemed invincible was gone. Her story didn't end the way it should have. She should have been standing tall, wearing the uniform she had dreamed of since high school. Instead, she was just a memory, a beautiful, painful reminder of how life can break even the strongest among us. I still hear her voice sometimes, still see her determined eyes in my dreams. And I wonder, what if things had been different? What if I had been able to help her the way she had always helped me? But some questions have no answers. Some stories are left unfinished, forever echoing in the spaces they leave behind. When we finally completed our training, fate smiled upon us. I was posted at the same location as Sarah. It felt like life had come full circle, as if all those years of shared dreams and relentless determination had led us to this moment. We weren't just friends anymore. We were comrades, standing side by side in uniform, ready to take on the world. Having her there made everything easier. The long hours, the grueling drills, the weight of responsibility. None of it felt overwhelming because we had each other. Even better, we shared a room in the hostel, just like we had imagined back in high school. Late at night, we would talk about our future, our aspirations, and the kind of officers we wanted to be. It felt like we were unstoppable. But then, one evening, Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper as she shared something that had been weighing on her. She told me about Sub-Inspector Kevin, how his eyes lingered on her longer than they should, how his compliments always had an underlying tone that made her skin crawl, how he would find excuses to be near her, trying to turn casual conversations into something more. She had been brushing it off, pretending it didn't bother her, but I could see the unease in her eyes. I felt anger rise in me, but at the same time, I knew this wasn't something new. The world was full of men like him, men who thrived on making women uncomfortable, who believed their rank or experience gave them some unspoken right to cross boundaries. I told her what she already knew, but needed to hear again, that fear only gives power to people like him, that standing up to them is the only way to take that power back. Something changed in Sarah that night. She didn't break down or dwell on it. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and let out a deep breath, as if releasing the weight of fear she had been carrying. From that day on, I saw a shift in her. She no longer avoided Kevin's gaze or tolerated his inappropriate behavior with forced politeness. Instead, she met his eyes with unwavering confidence, responding to his advances with a sharp, professional coldness that left no room for misinterpretation. Kevin noticed the change, too. His smirks became less frequent. His attempts to push boundaries started to wane. Sarah had sent a message, loud and clear, without ever having to raise her voice. She had taken back control, refusing to be a silent victim of someone else's arrogance. Watching her handle it with such strength only deepened my admiration for her. She had always been fearless, but now she was unstoppable. And in that moment, I knew, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would never let anyone break her spirit. Sarah's wedding was a bittersweet moment for me. I had always seen her as this fierce, unstoppable force, and now she was stepping into a new chapter of life, one that wasn't just about her dreams, but about building a family. I supported her wholeheartedly, helping her with the preparations, standing by her side as she took her vows, and reminding myself that this was what she wanted. And for a while it seemed like everything had fallen into place. She looked happy, radiant even, as she embraced her new role as a wife. Marriage brought new responsibilities, but Sarah tackled them with the same determination she had always shown. When she had her 2 daughters, I saw a different side of her, softer, more nurturing. She took immense pride in being a mother, pouring all her love and strength into raising her little girls. Watching her with them, I could see that they were her world, her reason for pushing forward. It was almost as if she had found a new purpose, one that made all the sacrifices worthwhile. But life has a cruel way of testing even the strongest souls. Richard, the man she had trusted with her future, began to change. At first it was small things, coming home late, drinking a little more than usual. But soon, those little things became patterns. The man she had once loved started to slip away, replaced by someone unrecognizable. Alcohol consumed him, and his nights were spent partying while Sarah was left alone to hold the family together. She tried to reason with him. She reminded him of their children, of the life they had built together, of the love they had once shared. But Richard wasn't listening. His addiction had taken hold of him, and nothing, not her words, not their daughters, not even the pain in her eyes, was enough to make him change. I saw the weight of it on her shoulders. She never openly complained, never let the world see her breaking, but I knew her too well. The sleepless nights, the forced smiles, the way she held her daughters a little tighter whenever Richard stumbled home in a drunken haze, it was all there, written in the exhaustion on her face. She was fighting a battle she shouldn't have had to fight. She had spent her whole life being strong, standing up to the world, but this was different. This was her home, her family, the life she had chosen, and no matter how much it hurt, she wasn't ready to give up on it. Not yet. She still believed that she could fix it, that if she just held on a little longer, Richard would come back to her. But I could see the truth. The man she was waiting for was already gone. Sarah had always been a fighter, but this was a battle unlike any she had faced before. With Richard lost in his world of alcohol and reckless indulgence, the weight of their family fell entirely on her shoulders. She became everything at once, a mother, a provider, a protector. Every morning, she would wake up before dawn, ensuring her daughters were fed and ready for school, handling the household chores, and then rushing off to work as if nothing was wrong. But I knew the exhaustion that lurked behind her tired eyes, the silent screams buried beneath her measured words. She confided in me often, unloading the burdens she couldn't share with anyone else. Sometimes she was angry, furious at the man who had promised to be her partner but had abandoned her instead. Other times, she was just tired, worn down by the never-ending cycle of responsibilities. "It's like I don't exist anymore," she had whispered to me once. "I'm just surviving." I wanted to tell her to leave, to walk away from the man who had become a ghost in her life. But I also knew Sarah. She wasn't someone who gave up easily, especially when it came to her family. So I listened in silence, offering nothing but my presence, because deep down I understood this was a battle only she could fight. Then, something changed. Sarah stopped talking about Richard. It wasn't sudden, more like a slow fade. The late-night calls, the whispered frustrations, the desperate search for solutions. It all disappeared. At first I thought it was a good sign, that maybe she had found a way to fix things. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw something that scared me even more than her anger or sadness. Acceptance. As if she had finally made peace with the idea that this was her life, that nothing would change, and she had no choice but to endure it. It broke my heart to see her like that, to see the fire in her dimming, flickering under the weight of disappointment. And then, just when she had stopped hoping, Richard changed. It was almost too good to be true. He started coming home earlier, making an effort with the girls, cutting down on his drinking. For the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were turning around. I saw it in the way she smiled a little more, in the way her voice carried a trace of something I hadn't heard in a long time. Hope. For a brief moment, it felt like she was getting the life she had fought so hard to hold on to. And I wanted to believe it too. I wanted to believe that this was the start of something better. But deep inside, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't over yet. It was just hiding, waiting. And Sarah, for all her strength, had no idea what was coming next. That evening felt no different from any other. Sarah and I were chatting on the phone, our usual conversation filled with the mundane details of our day. But there was something in her voice, something distant, as if she was there, but not really present. I asked her if everything was okay, and she hesitated for just a moment before saying she was fine. Then, with a sigh, she told me she'd call me tomorrow, that her family had just come home. It was such a small thing, something so ordinary, that I never could have imagined it would be the last time I'd ever hear her voice. The next morning, the call I received shattered my world. The words didn't make sense at first. Sarah was gone. She had taken her own life. My mind refused to accept it, refused to believe that the strongest person I had ever known had made such a choice. I rushed to her house, hoping, praying that somehow it wasn't true, that there had been a mistake. But when I arrived, the reality was undeniable. The house was filled with people, hushed whispers and muffled sobs hanging in the air like a suffocating fog. I stepped into her room, my hands shaking as I looked around. Everything was still untouched, as if she might walk in at any moment. But on the dresser, neatly placed as if she had carefully planned it, was a letter. My heart pounded as I picked it up, scanning the words that she had left behind. She had one final request, that her daughters be married into good families, that they be given the happiness she could never find. And then, as if carrying the weight of the world, she had written an apology. An apology, as if this had been her fault, as if she was the one to blame. Tears blurred my vision, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. I wanted to scream, to shake the universe and demand answers. How could this have happened? How could Sarah, the girl who had faced every challenge with unwavering strength, be gone just like that? I thought of all the moments we had shared, the dreams she once had, the battles she had fought. And now, all that remained were memories and an empty space where she used to be. I wished I had seen the signs, that I had pushed her to talk more that night, that I had somehow reached through the phone and held on to her just a little longer. But it was too late. Sarah was gone, and all that was left was the unbearable silence of everything she never got to say. Sarah's death shook everyone who knew her, but the world moved on far too quickly. For a few days, people whispered, speculated, and expressed their sorrow. The news channels flashed her name, reporters spoke about her tragic end, and there was an outpouring of sympathy. But just as quickly as the headlines appeared, they disappeared. The world had other stories to tell, other tragedies to cover. And Sarah, who had once been a force of strength and resilience, became just another forgotten name in the endless cycle of news. The police launched an investigation, but it felt hollow from the start. There was no urgency, no real push for justice. It was just another case, another file on a desk. Sarah had been labeled as a woman who took her own life, and for most, that was the end of it. But something about it never sat right with me. Sarah was a fighter. She had endured so much. Why would she give up now? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her death than what was being told. And then, the truth began to surface, piece by horrifying piece. Richard, the man who had once vowed to protect her, had done the unthinkable. His sudden concern for his daughters after years of neglect raised suspicions. It wasn't long before the horrifying reality was uncovered. He had sold his own daughters to human traffickers. The very children Sarah had fought so hard to protect, the reason she had endured so much, had been betrayed in the worst way imaginable. The revelation sent shockwaves through everyone who knew her. How could a father do something so monstrous? How could he look his daughters in the eyes and trade their lives away for money? The thought of what Sarah must have gone through, of whether she had discovered the truth before she died, sent shivers down my spine. Had she tried to fight back? Had she known that the man she once loved was capable of something this vile? Even more disturbing was the fact that Richard hadn't done it alone. A police constable, someone who had sworn to uphold the law, had helped him cover it up. A man who was supposed to protect the innocent had been complicit in selling them into darkness. It was a betrayal so deep, so horrifying, that it left me sick to my stomach. Justice seemed like an impossible dream. The system had already failed Sarah once, and now it had failed her daughters. The horror of it all was unbearable. Sarah had spent her whole life fighting, but in the end, the people closest to her had become her worst enemies. And as I stood there, drowning in the weight of it all, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. Someone had to fight for Sarah, for her daughters, for the truth. And if no one else would, then I would. The news of Sarah's daughter's fate felt like a final, crushing blow. After everything she had endured, after all the sacrifices she had made, her worst fear had come true. The girls never made it to safety. They never got the chance to escape the nightmare forced upon them. Their lives were stolen before they could even understand the cruelty of the world around them. They were found abandoned on a desolate road, their small bodies lifeless, their futures erased. There were no signs of struggle, no chance of survival, just silence. And beside them lay a chilling note, cold, heartless words that confirmed what we already knew. The police will never take responsibility for their deaths. It was more than a confession. It was a statement of power, a reminder that justice was never meant for them. The people who were supposed to protect them had ensured their silence. There was outrage for a brief moment, whispers of corruption, anger, disbelief. But just like Sarah's story, their tragedy was buried beneath the weight of indifference. No arrests were made. No investigations led anywhere. The world moved on, just as it always did. And in the end, Sarah's worst nightmare became her legacy. A story no one would remember, a tragedy swallowed by the silence of a system that had never cared.